Right, good morning everyone. So this is just going to be a very quick overview of Friday's lesson for one or two people primarily who missed the lesson. So just to make sure you know exactly what the lesson is about and what you need to do. So the topic is it's called The Appeal to Nationalism to Achieve Unity. It's picking up on that sort of a key theme that when Germany was created in 1871, although theoretically, with the new constitution of January 1871, it was now a politically unified empire. Actually, beneath the surface, there were significant divisions, and Bismarck, as the Chancellor of the new German Empire, one of his key objectives was to strengthen unity, was to bring about greater unity in order to ensure not just the survival of Germany, as a new country in Europe, but also that it would grow and become a great power. So how to bring about that unity. And as the title of the lesson suggests, one of the key objectives was to appeal to the German people across the 25 different states, appeal to their patriotism, their sense of pride in we are all Germans, in order to sort of bring people together to overcome the divisions that existed. Okay. Just a reminder that by today, Sunday the 22nd of November, you need to have given your first self-evaluation. There's the instructions and the folder check task. That's by the 24th, and again there are the instructions. And finally, your second essay, which is what I announced in the lesson on Friday. Okay, so the question is, to what extent did Bismarck succeed in reducing divisions in the new Germany in the years 1871 to 79? And the deadline for that is Wednesday the 16th of December, the very last lesson of the term. So again, you can just pause this video and if I'm going too quickly, and read the instructions. I won't go through them on the video. Just want to get into the lesson. So there's our lesson. As you can see, after today there is just one more lesson left for Depth Study 1, the War in Sight Crisis. And then we'll move back to the breadth study and look at the Navy building programme and why that was important. So that was the flip learning for this lesson. Hopefully you did that before the lesson from the textbook, just to secure a basic knowledge and understanding. And then the supercurricular. Lynn Abrams is very strong on this issue about nationalism and the minority groups and the coming together of those groups. So spend some time reading that. Quite a lot of information there. I've taken scans there of the different pages. You've got my notes, my marginal annotations, which will help you sort of like locate the key information. Okay, so read that with that purpose of thinking, what did Bismarck do to strengthen national unity? Okay, and how in particular did he address the problem about ethnic minorities? And then a new one, which it's a book I'm actually reading at the moment, Christopher Clark's Iron Kingdom, The Rise and Downfall of Prussia. And there's a good section there about Poles, Jews and other Prussians that addresses this issue of divisions within the newly united German Empire and how they were tackled during the Second Reich to create national unity. William Carr has got a section with some relevant information, and Richard Evans, his book The Pursuit of Power, pages 644 to 47. Okay, so plenty for you to work on supercurricular wise to sort of like deepen your knowledge and understanding of this topic. And I put that slide on just to highlight really how many, there were 56.5 million imperial citizens living in this new German empire. 52 of them were German speaking, but there were many national minorities, and Poles 3 million, mainly in the east. Well, they were in the east. French, of course, and that would be primarily in Alsace-Lorraine, 211,000. Danish, we've said, 141,000. They would have been in the north, the Schleswig-Holstein region, etc., etc. So it kind of like highlights the point about the fact that it was not a unified nation in the sense of language, and of course many of these national minorities who found themselves living in the new German Empire in 1871 were separatists in their beliefs. They wanted to break away. So we'll begin then with the first strand, which is national symbols. Okay, so again, you can just pause the video and read. I won't go through all of the points here. Okay, so this sort of opening section makes the point in the summary there that it was a new country, 1871. There were lots of divisions. A lot of work was needed to strengthen Germans' sense of we are now German, we are all German, part of a new German country. Most Germans still identified with their local region, whether it be Bavarians or Saxons or Prussians or etc., etc. Okay, so Bismarck, the head of government, the chancellor of this new country, introduced some fairly superficial measures to try to strengthen national identity, especially symbols. But he was very realistic. He understood that it would take many years to overcome local differences and to create a sense of pride in their new country. So, examples of national symbols: the national anthem, the flag, they were introduced. A national holiday was introduced, which was the anniversary of a key battle in the war against France, the Franco-Prussian War. But these are superficial. They're not, just because you do that, it's not going to make Germans, it's not going to make the sort of 56 million citizens of the empire immediately identify with the new Germany. There's a source there. Read that through in your own time. Remember that we haven't done any lessons yet on how to answer the source question, but you will be given in the exam a source of that length, and you'll be asked a question about its value for 2 lines of inquiry. So you need to be reading these sources as we go through. But there's the problematic issue. Okay, so many German citizens didn't really identify with the national holiday because they didn't really identify with the Battle of Sedan, that they saw as a Prussian victory, not a German victory. And generally, socialist politicians, rejected the national holiday because, remember, socialism is the political ideology of the far left, or of the left, the political left. And socialists were international. Workers of the world unite against the capitalists, the rich of the world. Okay, so if you're a socialist, you didn't really believe in nationalism and pride in your country. You believed that barriers between countries prevented the workers of the world pulling together. Okay, so socialist politicians therefore rejected the national holiday, the new national holiday. They saw it as a celebration of right-wing values, in particular promoting war, militarism, and of course militarism. If you're a socialist, that they see that as the working classes of one country fighting the working classes of another country, and the rich of the different countries just basically making profit out of the war. So they reject the notion of war. So I put there, go to my video about, there are those 3 videos, they're in a playlist about political left, political right and centre, and if you're a bit rusty on that, make sure you revisit it, play that video again, okay? Can't really do this enough. You've got to be absolutely secure in your understanding of the political concepts. Okay, so that's the first one. And then, as you can see, the next 3 strands of the lesson really look at 3 aims, 3 methods that Bismarck used, that he used to strengthen nationalism. The first is education, the second is culture, and the third is this idea, this notion of enemies of the empire. So one of Bismarck's key aims was to try to integrate Germans, to get them to identify with their new country. And the way to do this is to promote a greater national identity. And there are the 3 strands that we're going to now look at. And the first strand then is education. So again, just pause, read that summary. Okay, so the key point here is really that Bismarck was realistic enough to understand that to really strengthen unity in the long term, then it's important to work on the younger generations. In a sense, the older German citizens, they've grown up being Bavarians and being Saxons, etc. And so it's going to be harder to get the older generations to change their way of thinking, but the younger generations, they are the future. So big emphasis on schooling and universities. So again, there's some of the detail that should be in your mind map. And again, pick this up. Lots of good information about the universities and schools in Abrams in particular. And again, in Clark, go to that and make some additional notes, because the textbook is very sketchy on this. And considering you could be asked to write for 45 minutes in the exam on this topic, you need a lot more information than is given to you by the textbook. That word homogeneous is a nice word to use. Homogeneous, in other words, ironing out regional differences, trying to promote a unity across the nation. Done in all sorts of subtle ways. Board games, that's sort of subtle indoctrination, really, subtle education. It's engendering pride in the country and the achievements of this new Germany. Next round, culture. So again, pause and quickly read that. So Bismarck was very aware of the fact that there were ethnic minorities in the different regions of Germany. The French in Alsace-Lorraine, the Danes in Schleswig-Holstein, the Poles in eastern Prussia. And so he introduced quite repressive policies, what we call Germanization, that forced the teaching of German in these areas, and also population expulsions. So again, I would urge you in particular to read Abrams and Clark to pull out more information, to add more information to your notes, okay, because the information in the textbook, which is the basis for the lesson slides, is fairly scant, to be honest. Nice word there, separatism. Again, add that to your vocabulary list. Okay, so there's the detail. Again, pause this slide and add it to your mind map, or your add them to your notes, your Cornell notes. And then the next one. And the next one's an interesting one. It's just really worth making sure we spend just a little bit longer on this one. The idea of enemies of the Reich. Okay, so again, just pause the video and read that in a nutshell summary. So, remember what I said a few minutes ago when I talked about Germans who were socialists, whose political ideas were on the left wing of politics, and socialists were international in their outlook. They actually didn't believe in nationalism. They didn't believe in that you should identify with your nation, because by identifying with your nation, it closes you off to the fact you've got fellow people in other nations who are similar to you, and in particular the working classes. Okay, that the workers of the world should be pulling together and uniting against the rich of the world, and having boundaries between countries, and being distracted by pride in your country. It distracts you away from your true role, which is to link up the workers of the world. So socialists were therefore international. Okay, international. Now clearly, Bismarck didn't agree with socialists. Okay, what Bismarck wants all Germans to do, whether you are rich or poor, whether you're middle class or working class, he wants Germans to identify with Germany. Okay, he doesn't want German workers to be wanting to link up with workers in France and Britain and Austria, etc., against the rich of the world. Okay, so Bismarck therefore despised socialism, and in a similar sense, previous lesson, remember, Bismarck saw Catholicism as a threat for a similar reason, because Catholicism, like socialism, is international. Okay, it is an international religion. There are Catholics in every country, and so if Catholics are loyal first and foremost to the Pope in Rome, then that's going to undermine Bismarck's aim, which is to strengthen national unity in Germany. So that, hence the emphasis on socialists and Catholics, and we've seen how Bismarck attacked the Catholics through the policy called the Kulturkampf, and although he eventually abandoned it, he took it very, very seriously in the early 1870s and mid 1870s. His policies of attacking Catholics, and twinned with that, then very, very importantly, in 1878, Bismarck passed what we call the anti-socialist laws. Okay, which in effect banned public meetings of socialists. So it's all part and parcel of this attempt to strengthen nationalism. And the way in which Bismarck did that is he at every opportunity, he would, in particular with the socialists, make them scapegoats. Now that word's a key word. We tend to associate it more with the Third Reich and Hitler. At a later stage, Hitler made the Jews scapegoats. But what a scapegoat is when you focus on a particular group of people, and you blame them for doing something wrong, and by doing that, you encourage all other Germans to pull behind you as the leader. So by sort of focusing Germans' attentions on a minority group who are portrayed as being traitors, who are weakening the country, such as the socialists or such as the Catholics, you are making the socialists and the Catholics scapegoats, but it is a technique for creating national unity. Okay, and it's something that obviously Hitler did by targeting Jews as scapegoats in the 1930s and 1940s. It was a technique to try to get Germans to pull and unite behind Hitler, if Jews are portrayed as an enemy. So Bismarck, in a sense, did a similar thing with the socialists. Obviously, don't take the comparison between Bismarck and Hitler that far. They were very, very, obviously very, very different leaders in most sense of the word. I mean, Bismarck is obviously still seen, and probably with good reason, as one of the great German leaders. Okay, but nevertheless, some of the techniques he used bore comparison with the techniques that Hitler used at a later stage, albeit for a different purpose. So there's Bismarck targeting enemies of the Reich. Okay, and as I say, primarily the Catholics and the socialists. So there's our twofold purpose. Have a quick read. And then this slide gives more information about the focus, in particular in 1878, against the socialists. Okay, so again, you can pause the slide and just read it. And as you can see, what's said here is that, or the point is, in why 1878? Well, there were actually 2 assassination attempts on the life of the emperor, the Kaiser, in 1878, and Bismarck grabbed hold of those assassination attempts as an opportunity to say there was a socialist plot to undermine the German nation. And even though there was no evidence that the assassins had any connection with the SPD, remember, is the German Socialist Party. The actual point here as well is that actually the SPD, the Social Democrats, the German Socialist Party, remember, were very moderate. Bismarck always claimed, pretended, and exaggerated that said that they were, plotting a violent revolution, whereas in fact Bebel and Liebknecht and the early socialist leaders were very, very willing to work with Bismarck. They didn't really want to pursue a violent path. What they wanted was political reform, working with Bismarck, bringing about change through Parliament, through the passing of laws. Yet Bismarck didn't want to work with them, so he reacted by portraying them as radicals, as extremists. So there's that key word, reform, whereas Bismarck claimed they were revolutionaries. Okay. So there's that key law. It was called the Law for Combating the Criminal Aims of Social Democracy. Passed in 1878, it banned socialist meetings, and the police were given powers to randomly search, arrest and exile socialist politicians. So that's a key law that you need to know about and be able to write about in the exam. So this slide sort of attempts to represent, in the form of a diagram, what the point that we're making about how this worked. Okay, so there at the bottom of our social pyramid are the working labouring classes, in particular the urban workers. And the urban workers were increasingly attracted to international socialist ideas, Marxism, which called upon workers of the world to unite against the middle and upper classes and redistribute wealth more evenly. So there are the middle classes, and the middle classes, and at the top there are the upper classes. Okay, now the conservative upper classes were strongly nationalist. People like Bismarck, the Kaiser, the Prussian Junkers, etc., were strongly nationalists, and therefore they were very fearful of what's happening at the bottom, because if revolutionary socialists achieve their aims, then the upper classes will lose all their power and wealth. So how will the middle classes respond? Well, the middle classes were also deeply fearful of international socialism, and as a result were increasingly drawn to support the upper classes. So the middle classes and the upper classes therefore tended to sort of come together. And that's what that diagram is represented. We've already talked about how at the top the industrial new elites and the old Junkers worked together in the alliance of steel and rye. Well, what's now happening is the middle classes, the sort of white collar workers, and even the artisans, the small craft workers and small shopkeepers, are increasingly looking to the elites to protect them against the rise of the working classes, okay, who, as more and more peasants pour into the cities to take jobs in the factories, and as they settle in the cities, they're starting to read, that they have to learn to read to be able to work the machines, but they're also starting to read pamphlets, political pamphlets, and in particular they're reading the writings of Karl Marx. Marx, of course, is pushing for a revolution, the overthrow of the rich. The rich are the middle classes and the upper classes. So there's fear. Okay, and the point we're making is, of course, actually in Germany, the socialists were not really that radical. All they wanted to do was to work with the middle and the upper classes, discuss change through passing laws through the Reichstag, through Parliament. But Bismarck's strategy, in a sense, heightened the divisions. Okay, it introduced what we call a fracturing of society, increasingly strong divisions then between the forces of nationalism, which was supported by the middle classes and the upper classes, and the forces of internationalism, which were supported by the working classes. So there, it's a summing up then, that fracturing of German society. And this didn't happen in one go, but it gradually got worse and worse over 30 or 40 years, from 1871 to the point by the outbreak of World War I in 1914, arguably German society was very, very divided, okay, because of this, these events. Okay. So the final strand kind of like looks at what was national identity like by the year 1900. So again, just pause the video and have a quick read. So it asks that question: how successful was Bismarck? Now, in spite of what I've just said about the increasing fracturing of society, there is a counter-argument that said, on the whole, Bismarck did succeed in his objectives. He certainly did succeed in creating a pride in Germany's history and culture. He developed pride in Prussian militarism. German citizens from all parts of Germany, not just Prussia, but looked to Prussia with pride as this strong militaristic state that created their country for them and made them safe from foreign influences, the French and the Austrians, etc. Okay, and he also succeeded in developing a fear of foreign influences, that sort of scapegoat notion, which diverted attention away from domestic problems and helped to bind some Germans together. In particular, the middle classes and the upper classes were sort of like bound together, although, as I say, the working classes were kind of, in a sense, excluded. They were treated as scapegoats. So that was an issue. So all of these factors were Bismarck's legacy. Bismarck, remember, resigned in 1890. And as historians, we look back and we know what eventually happened, that Hitler took power in 1933 and took Germany into World War II. And there is an argument, in a sense, that what Bismarck had done is he had created, unwittingly, without knowing what he was doing, by creating a strong sense of nationalism and pride, and by creating a culture where foreign influences were seen as dangerous. It is a question, really: did Bismarck unwittingly prepare the soil for the rise to power of Hitler and the Nazis? So just read the slides, they just make the same point, really. And there's our finished mind map, okay, with the key building blocks for this particular topic. In our next lesson, we will finish off this first step study by looking at a foreign policy issue called the War in Sight crisis. So can you read the textbook pages 82 to 85? And as you read, focus on those questions. That's it. I'll sign off now. Hopefully that was useful for you as a quick overview. Thanks very much.